start. So, welcome to Snatch and Scotch. It's been a long time. We're back here with a regular on the show, Dr. Adam Wade. And we're here at VSC talking to Dr. Spina about movement, CrossFit, staying safe. One thing I wanted to cover from this, because something that's been irking me and losing sleep over this.
Can they see?
Is yeah, it's a fisheye, so you're good.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. It comes around?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So if you sit like this, you get more jacked.
Yeah, how do I look?
Everybody compared to Sil looks
This is the
small.
smartest look here.
That's right.
With the legs crossed.
People pretend I'm smart. Okay.
I've got
So-
my snowman socks on. It makes me seem more
Look at my
intelligent.
socks. I
I'm
got
sure.
burpee socks on. My wife-
You got those ones pulled up to your knees?
Yeah, I don't know why. I'm gonna lift after. Anyway, back to the podcast. So one thing that's been really eating away at me is programming for CrossFit, but keeping the programming more member specific. We had this conversation, and like in CrossFit, it's very normal that you program and then you scale. And then we're seeing the trend where people are no longer programming and scaling; they're programming and programming the scale, which is what you started kind of doing.
Yeah.
So you can keep it uniform amongst all coaches. You're not going to trust coach at 6 a.m. to scale one way and coach at 8 p.m. to scale another. So it's all pre-done for them.
Yeah.
But my thing is, what's the difference between scaling and progression? Because some members, like, scaling is just not good enough, man. Like, and is it okay to provide the same stimulus to people? The same stimulus, like relative intensity with the same stimulus, but does everyone need that same stimulus? This is what's been like really bothering me.
I think it depends on the context of what you're trying to achieve. If you give, if you're given a person who's trying to become a professional athlete, let's say they're a college player or whatever sport, really doesn't matter, and you're trying to get them to the big leagues, can you just give them a generic program, scale it back, get them to... No, I don't think it's enough for that.
Yeah.
If you're talking about general fitness, then that's a different thing altogether. But if you're alluding to the idea that if you have 100 people in a room, can you just arbitrarily get 100 people to do this exercise because that's what's in a WOD?
Yeah.
You could, but conventional wisdom would say that at least probably a good majority of those people probably don't have the prerequisites to do what you're asking them to do. And that's something that I talk about a lot is that word, which is really underutilized in not only in CrossFit but in any training scenario, is prerequisites. Do the people have the prerequisites to accomplish the movement that you're asking them to accomplish? If they don't have that, especially if they don't have that prerequisite in a non-weight bearing situation, you can't be surprised when you put them under load and they get hurt.
Yeah.
So if you have 100 people and you're like, today and you pick something very complicated like a snatch.
Yeah.
Today there's a snatch in the WOD. Well, you're assuming that everyone in the room has an incredible amount of ankle dorsiflexion, a really, really good amount of hip mobility, good spinal stability, that their shoulders have a good amount of flexion, that their scapulothoracic rhythms are all on. You have to assume all of these things to be true in order to safely give that exercise amongst a group of people that you've never assessed. Yeah. So,
and that's when someone comes into a gym and never lifted before, and they actually do a snatch, and they do it like almost perfectly. Yeah. You're like, oh my god, you're going to be an amazing CrossFitter one day.
Yeah.
Because that never happens, and it's like very, very rare.
Well, sure.
Right?
It's such a complicated
So my thing is, so let's take the snatch for example. If we have a snatch, you could scale obviously the snatch for beginners from the hang power, dumbbell snatches, all that stuff. But what if they don't have the prerequisites for that? That's the problem. They're not explosive enough to even move their body properly without a dumbbell.
Look, okay, so I'll give you a better example because it's a lot easier than a snatch. Handstands. This happens to me all the time because I get people from parkour communities, movement communities, CrossFit communities, and now CrossFit they're doing handstand walking and stuff. And people are coming in and they're saying, oh my god, my wrists are killing me. And you ask them about their program and they go, oh, we just started doing handstand practice and whatever. Now if you go onto YouTube and you say, how do I do a handstand? Almost inevitably there's going to be some guy on there saying the first step is get in front of a wall, propel yourself up onto your hands, and then the wall will be there to catch you. Now that would be something that you scale, right? Because you're not just going to go into a handstand, you're going to have a safety net. I don't think you should scale a movement particularly. I go back a level and I look at, okay, for that skill or that movement, what would be required of your joints? Forget about, you know, if you can't snatch, we'll just do a hang, we'll just do this. People take an exercise, they make easier, they compartmentalize it and try to make it easier, and then try to build the person back up. What I'm saying is, I don't even do that. I go a step further, and I look at their joints, and I say, do your joints have the capacity to even get you where you want to go?
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't, then never mind scaling down to do a handstand or do a snatch. Get your joints functional. So that same person that has that handstand problem with their wrist hurts, I'll tell them, how much extension do you have of your wrist? Mm-hmm. And they'll go like that. Like, okay, well, if that's as much wrist extension you have, now you're going to take your entire body weight and you're going to propel it onto these small joints as your first kind of exercise to get to a handstand. It doesn't make any sense, and that's what I think is happening to
and that's what I was kind of struggling with. I wasn't looking at their joints or anything like that, not that extent, but I was struggling with the prerequisites. I'm like, some people at my gym can't even do a dumbbell snatch. And if they do, what's the point? Because the weight is probably way too light, because they're not really getting the stimulus that's intended for them to get, because they can't move fast enough and they're not moving well enough. So that's kind of what I'm struggling with in terms of like the different boards I'm using.
Sure.
So board one, I take a lot of things from you, and we do a lot of like the scapular stuff, we do a lot of like the core stuff, and then we do like, in terms of the plyometrics, we just keep it really light, right? Maybe box jumps at most, right? Step ups, a lot of activation, and then the explosive movements, they slowly get better and they're able to do the explosive movements. But like I used to scale a lot to where I go full snatch, you know, power snatch, hang power snatch, and dumbbell snatch, and with everything, like, you know, pull ups, bend pull ups. But now I say screw it. If you can't even like hang on the bar properly, you're doing ring rows, and we talked about that, right? So I do crap load of ring rows, but that's what I'm kind of struggling with in terms of programming. Like,
well, I think the part where CrossFit is missing, and it's easier for me at my gym because I do it all day long, and I think where stuff like FRC is good is taking it a step back. So instead of like when someone new comes into CrossFit, it's not, can you do a kettlebell swing or can you do this? It's joint by joint. Does your joint have this range of motion? Because if you don't have range of motion here, you're going to compensate somewhere else, right?
And that's we're missing that big time. That's why we're trying to do a functional podcast. What's up?
Yeah, I think.
I don't know if you saw that we posted online. I did. It was a kind of a bastardized FMS screen. He posted it up. It's like, it was on 50 minutes long. I went over. I think we talked for like 50 minutes, but I went over very basic stuff that CrossFit guys understand. It was like, here's a squat. If you're missing this, here's what you'll see. If you're missing this, here's what you'll see. And not just getting someone, like the first one we did on squats, not just getting someone, okay, do a squat, and then let's analyze it. Because if you have someone who's new who's never squatted before, of course they're going to do it terribly wrong. Have them do a whole.
Or if you've seen someone who's done that test before, they're going to do it fake right.
Yes, and figuring out, okay, if they can sort of do it, what are you looking for? What's going to compensate? You know, what are you going to load too much? And then what are you going to look for? Or what are you going to look to give the person to do on their own in order to improve those areas so that they can participate?
On your own is the biggest thing.
So that they can participate in CrossFit.
That's what I was going to say.
This is what you and I run into all day long with patients is, here's your problem. I think I stole it from you, was in any patient interaction, it's 50-50. If you're in my office, I'm doing my 50%. Your 50% is doing the exercises I prescribe you to do at home. If you're not doing that, we're only going to get so far. And the same thing is true with CrossFit. You can have all the gusto and energy you want to participate and go hard. If you're not doing the prerequisites so that you can do those movements, you're just going to end up hurt.
I kind of copy what you've been doing, because I force the prerequisites now to where, like, I'm like, hey, you need to get strong, you need to get conditioned, but we can take 5 minutes off the conditioning session and 5 minutes off the strength session, take the volume down a little bit, and force them to do that prerequisite at the beginning of class, and like lead them, make it almost like a requirement.
Yeah.
So I feel that definitely works. So, I mean, at the end of the day, that stuff's boring.
Look at it. This is I think if you step back and look at the heart of the whole problem, let's just take the industry as a whole, CrossFit, training at all. If we were living the way we were supposed to live, we'd probably have these prerequisites in place. I always say that if we were in a hunter-gatherer society, my job becomes obsolete because there's nothing to fix, because those people, they move all day, their joints are constantly being challenged with crawling and climbing and hunting and fighting and this and that ever since they're very, very young. Now you take someone who's 30 years old, they're out of shape, and all of a sudden I want to do CrossFit. Yeah. Now here's the problem. That person wants to go into a gym and say, oh man, I got a real hard workout. But if you really want to be technical, they have a good, how many months to a year of doing stupid little corrective, I hate that word, but corrective exercises just to get you back to being human. Forget about being a CrossFitter and doing all this crazy stuff. People are so, they're so lost in their body that they have no idea like how to move. The way their brain to their body is connected is all wrong, from sitting like this, like we're sitting like this all day, from eating fake food, from doing, you know, sitting at a computer desk all day. So we're so far away from doing the complicated stuff that we always do that it makes it almost impossible to build people up to where you need them to be. Yeah. Because you know, to do a snatch, that's freaking hard, man. It's not like, that's hard for Olympic lifters do it millions of times, and they screw up quite a bit, right? Now to ask someone who's just, you know, an accountant who's never worked out before, okay, we're going to do snatches and we're going to do them fast for time. Yeah. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised. That's what gets me when people are like, I don't know why you're getting hurt. It's like, you don't? Like, you kind of do, don't you? Yeah. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, so getting back to the prerequisites, it's like, I think what we're doing nowadays is we're looking to observe movements, and that's how we're trying to determine where something went wrong. Like you're looking at someone squat. But even a simple bodyweight squat, it's a complex interplay between various articulations. So you were talking about the FRC system. What I'm saying is that, you know, everyone's talking about functional this and functional that. I think that functional exercise has almost hindered joint health in the long run, because we're so worried about interdependence, this joint working with this joint, working with this joint, and doing compound exercises to make sure the whole body's involved. And what we're forgetting is every single joint has to be maintained, and its health has to be thought of, assessed.
Well, the shoulder is the biggest one, right?
I think they're all important. You can take any. No, but you can take any movement, especially
it's a good example
of like when we do a lot of pressing, right? And it's functional, but when we have to isolate our lower traps, which is what CrossFitters are weak at, you're always saying, right? Then that's isolation.
You're weak at a lot of stuff, and they're usually really stiff because a lot of them sit at a desk like that. As soon as you sit at a desk at a computer all day, your thoracic spine and shoulder blades, they don't need to move. Yeah. So why would they move?
True. And that's again going back to that, the thing that we forget. A lot of people forget is that the only way for a joint to maintain health is through movement. That's it. This is not a point to be argued. The cartilage in your joints doesn't have good blood supply, so the only way it's going to get nutrients is by diffusion. The only way it's going to expel waste products is by compressive forces. So moving is really the only thing that keeps a joint healthy. Now, you take someone who sits at a chair all day, who, by the way, we know that this wasn't part of our evolutionary process, right? This is not a normal stimulus. So we sit at a chair all day, and we're locking, let's say, our lower lumbar spine into position. So we don't really, people don't, in a general sense, they don't really get the movement in individual segments, like L5-S1. How often do you really move L5-S1? You don't. So what happens when you don't move a joint? Well, when you don't move a joint, it starts to break down, and we call it arthritis or whatever other weird name we want to give it. So that stops moving, and then that's going to progress movement to a different area, and that's going to overwork, and then you just get this
cascade.
Yeah, cascade in this webbing of this doesn't move, so this doesn't move, so this doesn't move. Now what we do is we say, okay, let's just take squatting. Put your arms over your head and squat, and I'm going to try to see where you went wrong. Well, the problem is strength can compensate for a lot. So there's a lot of dysfunctional people that can score very high on these tests. And you don't see the interplay of every single segment. You don't know what, even if they can squat perfectly, what is L5-S1 doing? Can that actually move independently? And that's where I'm coming from. I'm saying, no, let's look at every joint. And if you want to get them to this exercise, don't worry about the exercise. Do the joints involved in that exercise do what they're supposed to do? If the answer is yes, then slowly progress them to the exercise. If the answer is no, then no amount of scaling is going to make L5 on S1 move. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense.
That has to be done first, because you can't fake it. It's not like you say, it's okay, I'll use more L4 on L5. Okay, but then don't be surprised when you have arthritis in L5 S1.
Is that chronic though? If they can't use a specific joint and you're working on that joint, but at the same time you're trying to give them a workout, right?
Yeah.
Is that giving them a workout even scaled? Is that going to
work L5 S1? It's not going to be a workout. That's the problem. It's just going to be. It's going to be very boring, like you said. It's going to be very boring exercise. Where I think the hard thing is providing a workout within the confines of what they're able to do.
Yeah.
And we're talking perfect world, by the way. Like, I understand you own a box, so you have classes running. I get it, but let's just pretend that we can just work with one person. Perfect world, we would look at all of their joints. Okay, what needs work, and then we'd probably give them a workout, because they need to have a workout that is under the whatever they can do. Now, is that possible? I don't know. You guys run CrossFit gyms. I don't think it's possible, but
I think to a certain degree you will always end up compromising something. To a degree, it's minimizing risk to an acceptable level, right?
Is that bad? I mean, like in terms of like
to load something like crazy?
Not like crazy, but to challenge them a little bit, even though they may not be 100% ready, because it's not. Because there's no such thing as optimal training.
It depends what a little bit is. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Sure. I don't think, like, the other thing is, maybe I am coming across wrong, the other thing that I don't like is when you always get this when there's like a therapist who becomes a trainer. When a therapist becomes a trainer, whoever they're training, probably not going to make the big leagues, because they go so far in, no, we have to correct this, so let's just do this exercise.
Yeah, that's
like,
what
there's
I mean.
no
like,
workout to it. So yeah, you have to. Medium. There has to be a happy medium where you train them. But I think you had said homework. I think you had mentioned.
Yeah.
That's where the opportunity is. If you have the eye to go around and say, okay, well, when let's say you're overhead pressing. Well, if you're overhead pressing and I see people jut their head forward as much as they can. Well, put the weight down and get them to flex.
Yeah.
If you go from the side and you can't even see their ear, they have no business pushing weight over their head. It's just not going to go well for them. But that would be a situation where, okay, bring the weight down, continue to push weight over your head, fine. Bring the weight down and do these exercises at home. That to me seems like the only...
Mine is somebody I know. She's a client of yours.
Oh, he's a bunch of other patient.
She was pressing overhead the other day, and I was like, you're not pressing overhead, you're pressing in front of your head, so let's just take the weight down a little bit.
Yeah, pressing in front, and then she's probably bringing herself mass forward.
She wasn't even all that much. And then
just supporting
after, I was like, have you been doing your scapular exercises? Oh, not for months. And I was like, oh.
So you can run into the same thing we do with patients. But you know what, with patients, I get to the point now where if someone comes in and I'm like, how are you feeling? This still hurts. Did you do your exercises? They say, no, sorry, I didn't get a chance. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Don't say sorry to me.
It's like a teacher.
Yeah. My shoulder's fine. I mean,
it's like kids who come and say, I don't get it. I'm like, have you been doing your homework at all?
Yeah,
no. I'm like, well, have you been asking for help? No.
But what does that get back to? It gets back to what I was saying. It's the perception of health that is so skewed that people are running around looking for, well, this doesn't work. Well, what can I do? Tell me what to do. It's like, live better.
Yeah.
Like, do more stuff. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a
for sure.
It's a mentality of, I can go to CrossFit, but I don't need to. Okay, so CrossFit it's a sport. I mean, you have to think of it as a sport. If you went to play football on a football team, you have practice, right?
Yeah.
You go to CrossFit, and people are like, the one problem is that people think it's just a workout, and other people think it's a sport. But if you don't treat it like a sport, that's dangerous. It's like playing football with a bunch of people who have no idea what they're doing. Or put them in an MMA cage. Just two people have no clue how to fight. Just say, yeah, go at each other. That's a little bit dangerous, right? You have to do your preparatory work. And so if you don't treat CrossFit like a sport, that's a pretty dangerous, thing to do. Having said that, when people are like CrossFit's dangerous, I also laugh at them there. I'm like, well, how is football? Is that okay?
Yeah.
You're going to put your kid in football? Do you think that's safer?
Anything's dangerous.
It's a sport. It's a sport's a sport, right?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So how do we fix that? Like,
which part?
Well, here's the whole
process.
We're not fixing that.
Hang on. Back to the joint by joint thing, because it's.
I don't want to say joint by joint either.
No, sorry, not joint by joint. But as far as a way to help trainers, because I know exactly what you're talking about, but I would say the majority of coaches, and I mean the coaches who work at my gym, Sale his coaches. What is the fix? I mean, aside from constant education, but I mean motion palpation and stuff like that, do you focus on the large joints before you go small? Do you, like, as far as a recommendation?
When I assess?
No, not you, I would say your recommendation for them. Because we're not going to get trainers to turn into chirophysio.
No, I don't think you have to. I mean, I think there's a way to look at, well, I teach this way. You look at a joint and you can say, number one, is the joint normal?
Sure.
That's a big step, and I don't know that a lot of manual therapists have a good indication of, is that, like, when I'm teaching and I ask the class, I'm like, how do you define a normal joint? And people say, well, I move it, does it hurt? I'm like, well, no. Pain would define an unnormal joint.
Sure.
How do you define it as being normal? Like, how do you know when you don't have to touch the joint?
Mm-hmm.
And I get a lot of stares like, oh, I never thought of it that way. But that's really what we need to think of. What's a normal joint? If you can define it, then you can go and see if you have normal joints. It doesn't mean optimal. You can have a normal functioning hip with really shitty range of motion. That just means it's not optimal.
Mm-hmm. But
you can define it as normal. So when through its range of motion, there's no pinching. I always say that when you're taking a joint through its range of motion, if the range is restricted by the closing angle, then that's a problematic joint. Now, what do I mean by that? If you take someone's hip, for example, and you take them into abduction, and I say, what should be the range-limiting tissue at the end range of abduction? What should stop you from going? So if I stretch out that, your groin, right? You should feel a pull here, denoting the end range of motion.
If you pull.
Now, that doesn't happen. You can't assume that to happen, because when we're assessing joints, sometimes you'll bring someone into abduction, and the person says, I can't go any further because I feel a pinch, or I feel like it's restricted on this side of the joint. Now, when I hear that, I automatically know that this joint is not functioning the way a joint should function.
Mm-hmm.
A joint should function with opening angles being the restrictor. If that joint is the way that is, then that requires intervention. I won't let someone train through that, because that hip is not working well. So it doesn't matter what exercise you choose. If it involves a hip, it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
That has to be fixed. So that's a very brief way that I explain what's a normal joint. And if the joint's normal but not optimal, that's fine. I'll give you homework to try to optimize it. But if it's not normal, then it either has to be some therapeutic intervention or some very specific corrective exercise for that joint. Why did we come up with this topic again?
I wanted to ask about how to get trainers or coaches to assess. So if you have someone new coming in, do you go, like, because I like to do, just generally with them, it's like ankle, knee, hip, lumbar spine, thoracic spine, shoulder, elbow, wrist, so that you have. And that's what I did when we were talking. I sort of took a squat and went through each piece, saying, here's what it looks like, here's where you can compensate.
Is there a way to standardize that in layman's terms that's applicable? Right?
Well, that's what I tried to do in that talk.
In the FRC seminars, that's what we do. We give people not laymen, we give coaches and trainers a way to look at joints. So you can run through all the joints in the body relatively easy. Mm-hmm. You take it, you do an articular rotation, you ask where the closing angles are, where the restrictions are, is there any pain, which side's the pain on, that kind of thing. Yeah. And you can get a general thing, okay, the ankle lacks dorsiflexion, probably won't be able to do any front squats, this or that, is probably okay with a low bar back squat, etc., etc. The knee has this, that, and you can have a whole list of where they need work. Now, to get back to your question, if we wanted to prioritize, I always say that if you give me a limited amount of time to fix someone or to prevent injury,
optimize.
I'm going to make sure that they have shoulder joints, hip joints, and a segmenting spine. Now, what do I mean by a shoulder joint? If you take someone's arm and you go into internal rotation, and this happens.
That's a nice internal rotation.
Yeah.
My left internal rotation is really crappy.
If I don't have it, I'd have a hard time lecturing on it.
Yes.
But if you go into internal rotation, you get that coupling motion. I always tell people that means you don't have a shoulder. Because what's a joint? A joint is a space between two bones, which means that the bones are supposed to move independently of one another. Now, if you take a scapula and a humerus, and you start to rotate, and all of a sudden it locks, and everything moves together, now you don't have a shoulder joint. And if you don't have a shoulder joint, any exercise involving your upper body is not going to go well for you because you don't have a shoulder.
Yeah.
Like in the hip, if you internally rotate the hip and immediately the pelvis starts to hike up, you don't have a hip. And if you don't have a hip, it's not going to go well. So those two, and then the spine. The spine is a big one. I find that people are so worried about stiffening the spine and strengthening the core, but if you don't have intersegmental motion, meaning that if the vertebrae sit on top of each other, if there isn't at least the ability, there's a very minimal amount of motion between segments, millimeters, but those millimeters add up over a section. But if you have no movement in a section of the spine, and then all of a sudden you have all the movement, let's say at the TL junction, which is a very common CrossFitter problem, and then you have no movement again in the mid-thoracic spine, this is a problem, because now all of the forces are going to be put into that one joint that can move, as opposed to dissipating the force over an area of the spine. So that's a huge, and CrossFitting that's a big.
So when you're doing heavy overhead squats, and like, oh, I tweaked something in my back.
You're going to tweak
always
the same. It's always the same spot. You're going to tweak it over and over and over again. It's just it's going to. Actually, when I do I do a lot of work with MLB teams, and they have the same problem. They'll have like either back strains or they'll have oblique strains and things like that. And I said the exact same thing. If you look at one of your players as they swing a bat, if the rotation's happening at one segment, not below, not above, what do we call that? We call it segmental buckling, the chiropractic kind of therapy term. You're going to continue to either buckle the segment, or the soft tissue that's controlling, let's say your obliques around that region, that will tear or pull, and then you're just going to get the same injury over and over and over again. And that overhead squat example is a good example. With CrossFitters, you see the TL junction, you see a locked lumbar spine, you see overdevelopment of the erectors right at the TL, like almost like they have another ass on their back, and that's a serious dysfunction occurring right there.
Yeah,
and that's common. Just working at when I was at regionals the last few years, everyone their lower back, like their erectors are enormous. It's at that spot.
A lot of pulling.
Yeah, I mean it is hypertrophy, but it's hypertrophy because of a dysfunction at that segment. It should be big the whole way along, not just in one spot. Now, one thing that CrossFitters love is their foam rollers. As far as sequencing of setting things up, now I mean feel free to give me your opinion. The way I program for my gym is we get everyone to warm up, then we do any foam rolling, or smashing is the favorite term, which I dislike, but anyways, foam rolling, then you do your strength or workout, then at the end you do your prolonged stretching if you're going to do that. FRC stuff I see is fitting in the warm-up at the beginning to the joints moving. Opinions on that, or on sequencing, if it's wrong, or how you would do it? Because I know lots of people, they have misconceptions about they foam roll to get rid of the lactic acid, or all sorts of other entertaining ideas.
Yeah, foam roll. Did you see that video I put out on foam rolling?
Which?
I put on
the one with the pencils?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of hate that I get from that video is incredible.
So the way I rationalize foam rolling is, so, like, I always give you bang your elbow, what do? The first thing you do is you rub it, right?
Sure.
So gate theory of pain, you rub it, overrides neurons in your spinal cord, simplified version. So if you warm up and something feels stiff, foam roll it, right? Then all of a sudden it's numb. If that allows you to move better, so using strength training to move better as opposed to flexibility to move better, to me, if you move better after that, that is helping. Then do your prolonged stretching afterwards for joints where you have dysfunction in full range of motion for optimizing purposes. And that's why I would have it done in those sequences, because prolonged stretching, although it does increase range of motion, if done for long periods of time, research shows that you increase the likelihood of injury, especially doing high output activities. Now, if there's fantastic research that comes out to support foam rolling for everything, great, I'll use it. But at least that makes the most sense for me,
yeah.
and why I would use it in that sequencing.
I think what you're saying is a logical sequence of what to do.
Yeah.
But to make it even simpler, the question is, what does foam rolling do? That's what people don't like. That's the question. Now, what's the answer? I don't know. Nobody knows. Like, we don't know what it. I can tell you what it does. Yeah,
and that's the only thing I use it for. Is it numbs it, so I feel.
Now this is where it gets dangerous, though, because you know and I know that when you have an area, I mean, if our job as therapists was just point to where the boo-boo is and I'll rub it, then I don't really need to be here.
Yeah,
you can do like right.
Give everybody a foam roller.
It's a lot more complicated than You see, this is getting back to the way society thinks. Somebody says, I have back pain, my back's killing me. Another person says, I had back pain, I used a foam roller, ergo you should use a foam roller.
Yeah.
That's not logical. Like, that doesn't make any sense, because back pain can be,
many things.
How many different diagnoses can you have for these problems? Now, when you get on a foam roller and you start rubbing it, it feels good. Okay. But that doesn't mean there's been any therapeutic intervention that's occurred. So I put up that video about how it's not myofascial release.
Sure.
And I'll argue it it depends how you define myofascial release. But if you're trying to actually change structure of, like, cellular structure under the skin, you will not do it with foam rolling. There's no literature which will even point towards the idea that rolling over something quickly over the surface of the skin, even if you go as slow as people think they go, there's nothing to say that the cells even care about that stimulus.
When RMT flosses, like, for example, like your calf muscle, would that...
You mean when they do that?
Yeah.
Arguably, no.
No.
Arguably, for cells to... No, it's not. There we go. It doesn't mean stop doing it. And from that video, people are like, oh, you think foam rolling is not good. I never said don't foam roll. I think it's a great thing to, like what you said, before you train, if it makes you feel like you're more mobile or whatever, we'll talk about the definition of mobility in a second, but that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. What I get wrong with is when somebody says, I pulled something, or the back of my shoulder's killing me. I'm like, roll that out. Yeah. No, don't do that. Like, that's a real dumb idea. It's dumb. Like, I don't want it to be... It's dumb. You're dumb if you do that, because that's not what you should be doing. You should have that joint assessed and figure out, what's the... that's number one. The other one is going back to mobility. When people think that rolling on a ball or whatever is making them more mobile, they have a real weird definition of what mobility is. Similarly, and I hate to say it, when you take bands and you tie them to stuff and stretch with them, you're not doing mobility work. That's just stretching with bands. Okay? Stretching is inherently passive. Okay? Now, this is opening up a can of worms. If you look at the definition of flexibility, it's pretty much the ability to achieve a range of motion passively, so under the guidance of gravity or some external force. Now, if you look at the definition of mobility, just Wikipedia kind of definition, it says the ability to move, and then they tack on, or be moved freely and easily. But there's a problem with that part of the definition, is that now flexibility and mobility overlap each other as if they're the same things. Okay? So there's a real bad problem here, because it sounds like flexibility and mobility are the same thing. Which is probably why grabbing bands and distracting your joints while stretching, people are like, oh, I'm mobilizing myself. But the word mobility, mobile, comes from the Latin movere, which is to move, meaning there has to be movement. So I define mobility as the ability to actively achieve a range of motion, which requires flexibility plus neurological control of that flexible range of motion. So that's what mobility is. So when I always say that stretching with bands and foam rolling isn't mobility work, you're like, what do you mean? We do that before our WOD. It's mobility.
Yeah.
No, what you're doing is warming up and stretching. Okay, it's fine. But you're not teaching your system how to actively utilize the ranges of motion that you're achieving, which for me is the definition of becoming mobile. So if you can do the splits passively, I don't care. What I care is when you're standing, how high can you bring your leg under control? To me, that's a demonstration of what I term functional mobility. Doing the splits is just something that makes you look good in yoga class. It doesn't translate into any movement. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the definition of flexibility, mobility, is causing a lot of these problems. That's why people think I foam roll to become more mobile.
I simplified it, and I think, I mean, we're on the same lines. I always said mobility is flexibility and stability, right? So flexibility is, can the joint move throughout a full range of motion? Stability is, can you control it in that space?
Yeah,
so then when you look at someone is, all right, great, they can move a whole lot. Do they have any control in it? And the common issue with squats is their knees wobble in when they push out of the bottom of the squat, right? So they have no glute med control, so they get hip exercises, providing the person does it, right? But it's breaking it down into, okay, if you want to be mobile, are you missing one or both of these components? Right? And if you sat at a desk all day, probably you're missing both. But some people who are really flexible have no stability throughout a range of, or the ability to control a joint at any specific point throughout that flexible range. Then that's the way I've sort of attacked it. Is which one are we giving the person? Are we giving them stability work, or are we giving them flexibility, or are we giving them both?
See, and I mean, I think people... okay, so when people say I'm doing mobility work before I train, I think what they want to say is I'm mobilizing myself before I train. But being mobilized and training mobility is...
So what's your definition of doing mobility work before a WOD then?
I don't do mobility work before a WOD. Mobility work is work in and of itself. Like if I take you to the back and I say we're just going to do an hour of mobility training, you're not going to want to do that WOD, man. You're gonna, like, it's hard. It's not an easy.
You don't just fly through it.
No, it's incredibly neurologically taxing. Because again, getting back to my definition, you look at your range of motion that you have. Well, number one, we have to increase it. Number two, we have to teach your nervous system about the new ranges of motion, because they're not just automatically incorporated into daily life. Like, how often do you work out in this range? You don't. You work down in this range. So to think that grabbing a band and stretching for 10 seconds, or however long you hold it, to think that that's going to make a ripple in the water, it's not logical. It's just not. It's not going to. So you might temporarily increase your range, but the next morning, a week from now, that range is gone. So for me, mobility training is the progression of controlling and thus being able to utilize greater and greater ranges of motion. Mobilizing is what you do before a WOD.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Warm your body.
That explains what you're saying. You're saying the same thing. Makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
So basically, like, we're not doing mobility work. We're mobilizing to get in better positions so that we can move in better positions. But that doesn't mean we're developing long-term mobility. We're just being mobile for that one WOD.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, and this is where I remember the talk I gave at Sweat RX where I first met Sil, and he got upset because I
didn't get upset. Who's this guy?
Well, because I was negating what Kelly Starrett says, right? And I was like, I don't like test retest because you get temporary fixes. I like long term, right? I like to give the example with doing a squat. So if you come in, you can't do a squat, certain areas are tight, we give you mobility exercise. We give you flexibility or stability, something to work on, right? A month from now, if you can come in, squat better and squat further with no warm-up, with nothing, it's working. If you need to spend a ton of time rolling, doing warm-up, what have you, something's not working, right? You need to be able to come in dead cold and do a squat.
Well, it's also like that homework. It's that homework component. If you come in and you have an awesome warm-up and you mobilize, right, and you stretch and you're in great position and you're snatching and you're having a great workout, but then the next day your kid's sick and you just want to get a warm-up workout in, so you negate the warm-up, which happens way more often than not, and then you move in a shitty position because you don't have that long-term mobility, then you're just kind of, you're not putting on the Band-Aid before you're lifting. So,
getting back to what you were saying, I just lost my train of thought. What were you just
long-term change.
Okay, yeah.
Right? You should... No warm-up, like...
You were talking about test retest, that's what I was... Okay, listen.
The instantaneous. Well, that comes back to foam rolling. I feel better. Look, you do better.
I always say, and I teach this at FR, at FRC, I always challenge people. I say, if you can find me any piece of literature that demonstrates that the body changes in a permanent way to a single input, an input being a foam roll, a stretch, a this, or that, then I'll change my whole outlook on test, retest, and what can be done immediately. There's no such research. Never in the history, if we take the history of human research, we've not demonstrated any type of input that will automatically reorganize tissue and everything's going to be hunky-dory. So when you do something to someone, like let's say, I love this because therapists do this a lot, we're always awesome with this. We find a finding, we do something, then we retest it and we say, oh look, it's better.
Like ART.
What, not like anything.
Anything.
Anything. Let's say I'm muscle testing. So I have you here, I muscle test, he's weak.
Yeah.
Okay? I'll have to push harder to make it look like he's weak. So I do that and then I play here, whatever, I bring him back and I go like this and you have to do this face. I go, okay, now you're strong. What does that mean? Like, what tissue, what could possibly have changed permanently that I'm now happy with that finding? Now, somebody would say the nervous system can change very fast. Yeah, but that person doesn't understand the difference between short-term potentiation and long-term potentiation. Sure, you can do a neurological trick on the spot and make me test strong. But that's not going to test strong tomorrow, because that's just not how nerves work. The nervous system works through long-term potentiation. You have to send the signal over and over and over and over and over. Manual therapy. If you're trying to alter tissue, you have to send the signal over and over and over and over and over. And people don't think of this, and that's why we have these ideas like, I'm doing soft tissue work and I'm breaking adhesions. No, you're not. I mean, it's just not a logical conclusion, number one. Number two, whatever you did to that person, it's not going to last unless you reinforce it with repetitive inputs. So you can't do things once. So that's like when someone can't squat and you go, okay, well grab this band or grab this foam roll, okay, now squat. Now you can do it. See, I fixed you. No, you haven't. You haven't fixed anything. You've temporarily allowed a range of motion, which, by the way, the nervous system is not aware of how to utilize that range. That's the other thing that I was going to talk about. Just because you can foam roll, get someone into the position you want, you can't assume that the nervous system knows what to do in that position, because it's spent its whole life not going into that position. Now you all of a sudden open it up, but you still have to go back and teach the nervous system through long-term potentiation of inputs what that range of motion means. If you don't, then you're at a risk of hurting yourself.
So overhead squat position, you're finally getting into a really good position to overhead squat. Don't go for 1RM.
Oh God,
Take your time to reinforce that position.
Okay, so you're doing an overhead squat. The person doesn't have the flexion, so you might put them, I don't know, grab something and stretch them and and all of a sudden they can get into that position. Now, is that a safe position? Because think about this.
To the naked eye, it looks safe. It
looks safe, but how does your body determine what ranges of motion you're allowed to utilize? And I always use the same example. I read it from I think Pavel's book a long time ago. If you take, so can you do the splits?
No.
Okay. But if I would ask you to put one leg out at 90 degrees on the table, could you do that?
Yeah.
Could you, okay, put that leg down, put the other leg out at 90 degrees, could you do that?
Sure.
Why can't you do the splits?
Because the other leg has to go back.
Well, there's no muscle that crosses over the groin, right? So technically, if I put one leg out at 90, my gracilis is no longer than if I put my other leg out at 90, or if I put them out at the same time. Now, of course, there's pelvic tilting, but let's not get into everyone always wants to argue the example. It's just an example.
Yeah.
What the example demonstrates is that you obviously have the range of motion to do the splits. It's in you. But your nervous system doesn't believe that if you get into the splits, you can get the hell out. Because your nervous system will only give you ranges that you can control. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, if you do something, foam roll, whatever, and you get a good range, you get some more range of motion.
It tricks that nervous system?
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that the nervous system is happy in that position, that it knows what to do in that position. So now you just load up on 1RM, and then people get hurt, and they go, I don't know why I got hurt. Yeah, you do. You got hurt because you're doing something you can't do. And that's in my opinion, that's the majority of, I don't only get CrossFit injuries, but I get everyone, hockey players, everyone they all come in with the same thing. And the answer always boils down into, it's either you got a legitimate injury because you overstrain tissue, which is fine.
Yeah.
People get injured. That's the other thing. You can't prevent injuries. You can mitigate damage. People are going to get injured. But most of the time, you're trying to do something that you do not have the prerequisites to do. That's it.
It makes a lot of sense. My biggest problem is my shoulder injury, and I always get it from lifestyle, never from CrossFit. Like, I'll go in, I got sick, I was on the couch for 2 weeks, like this. I pick up my big kid who's a sack of potatoes. I got mama shoulders.
Yeah.
And then I go into CrossFit, I try one workout, I'm like, why does it feel so tight? I haven't worked out for 2 weeks.
Exercise, I talked about this, I wrote this the other day. Exercise is just a human's way to compensate for the fact that we don't live the way we're supposed to.
Yeah.
So we go in for an hour of exercise. Hunter-gatherer situation, there's no such thing as exercise because that's what humans are designed to do. You get up, if you want to eat, you're going to freaking exercise for a while to get that food.
Yeah.
So in our situations, like you were lying on the couch, you're taking care of your kid, and I feel I have to do the same thing. And then you go and train.
Yeah.
It's what we do, but let's not pretend it's normal. It's not normal.
No. Yeah.
It's just not normal.
Like the worst thing is if I work all day on the desk and I'm like I usually don't sit, I walk around as a teacher, but sometimes I'll mark and I'll sit there, and those days, and I drive to the gym, those days are just dread doing anything because my body just doesn't want to do anything.
Yeah.
Doesn't want to move, doesn't want to.
Because
so it makes a lot of sense.
I mean, it hasn't been moving.
Yeah.
You've been sitting.
So, anything else you want to talk about and wrap it up, or?
I wanted to ask about.
I
wanted to ask about fasting, just because I know CrossFitters are all big on their nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Are you eating today?
Today I'm not eating.
No. Okay.
No, not at all. Just the.
Oh, is that because you're making fun of me, son of a bitch?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not at all. I
was talking to him about me trying a little bit of intermittent fasting. And
really. I just know this because I know he mentioned he did it in a podcast or something. I was like, this is cool.
I remember this conversation, and then he's like, "That's not intermittent fasting." My brother-in-law does.
Oh, that's right. He wasn't eating till lunchtime. He was intermittent fasting.
No, I stopped eating at like 7 at night, and I wasn't eating till 12 the next day.
Yeah.
And he was arguing that that's not real fasting.
Well, the research it pegs it somewhere between 18 and 24 hours.
Oh shit.
Yeah. It's just new stuff just came out.
18 hours. That's almost 18 hours.
Well, I go Sunday night dinner to Monday night dinner. That's just the way I do it. But
okay.
Somewhere in between. Brad Pilon's a good guy to read up on.
Okay.
He has a book, Eat, Stop, Eat. But in terms of people are always asking me about, like, is fasting good for you? Is it this? Is it that? In terms of nutrition, and by the way, forget about manual therapy and training. You know how there's a lot of bullshit that gets, guru media, kind of all this stuff gets passed around. Nutrition is, in my opinion, by far the most, people are the most liberal with research.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh yeah, this supplement has research. And I remember when I did the sports residency.
Clinical studies.
Yeah,
those are my favorite.
When I did the residency, the nutritionist, she pretty much said, number one, if it's legal, probably doesn't work as well as you want it to.
Yeah.
And outside of like creatine, and caffeine, the amount of sports supplements that have any research.
Sure.
But getting back to fasting, it probably has the most research done more than any other dietary intervention in terms of it being good for you. I mean, there's a ton of research about. I mean, it's probably the only thing that's been demonstrated to increase life longevity. It's been shown to decrease cancer markers and increase good. Like there's a whole lot of research on fasting to be.
So you fast once a week?
I do once a week.
Once a week.
I do once a week.
Now, is that hard once a week? Because if you do one day and then you eat regular, the next week aren't you just like when you fast, you don't fast for a while and you're just hurting?
No, you know what? No? You learn a lot about when you fast. You learn a lot about what hunger is. Okay, number one. So people are like, that's so hard. Yeah, people are like, oh my god, that's so hard. It's so hard. It's not hard because this morning I got up and I was hungry. But then you go on with your day and all of a sudden you forget you're hungry. Then let's say now that you brought it up, I could go for something right now.
Sorry, man.
But but I'll forget. Now, the hunger that I feel now is no more powerful than the hunger I felt this morning. And by 4 o'clock tonight, the hunger I feel then, it's not going to be cumulative from the hunger I felt all day. It's just hunger.
Yeah. I read an interesting article
about like circadian rhythms. You get like it's the morning, I should eat.
Yeah,
it's a habit.
Well, I read an interesting article about like different types of hunger. That was like true hunger, where babies cry and scream because they're just physically hungry. And you have like psychological hunger, you have habitual hunger, and
so I don't think a lot of people don't understand hunger at all, because they've never gone with. Most people never go any time in their life in an actual starved state.
Mm-hmm.
It takes 18 hours before all of the food you have in you is completely consumed. How many people go without food for 18 hours?
Now, you still drink liquids, or?
A lot of water, black coffee.
Okay.
No calories in it.
Yeah.
Put a little bit of milk, I should have, but black coffee and water. And a lot of people ask me about, are you tired, and I always say my best workout day is my fast day. I have the most energy on a fast day. And when you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes sense, because when did we hunt? When we were
hungry.
When you're hungry. No dude back in hunter-gatherer caveman days is sitting there after they just ate a steak and they're like, all right, let's get up and go hunting.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah, they're exhausted.
Yeah, you're hungry, you're starved, you go hunt. So technically you would assume that the body's processes, the way the body functions, it's ingrained in us to function at a higher capacity when you desire food. So
except for burpees, for some reason.
Burpees are never good for anyone.
When I'm hungry, I can't do any burpees.
Burpees are just an abnormally mean thing to do, man.
When I get hungry, for some reason, I get dizzy in burpees.
I thought you would get hungry, you start doing burpees. That would be a weirder.
No.
That's strange.
Yeah, so that's the fasting thing. Yeah, it's great, man. It's
awesome.
You know what else it does is that the days you're not fasting, you realize how often you eat for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And if you understand hunger better, then you're better with your body. Yeah, right? So you're not going to eat like random things because
sure,
makes a lot of sense.
It's not eating out of habit; it's eating out of like
necessity. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Let's start fasting.
Dude, I should say I do it all the time. I will commonly have days at the office where I do the same. I eat last night. I'll get to work and usually just have coffee in the morning and I'll just get going and the day will get away from me.
It doesn't count if you have
6 o'clock. I better eat something.
Coffee, eh? Because the amount of fat.
Bulletproof coffee is that's a huge meal, man. That's a big. People forget about that. Eh?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm gonna have two tablespoons of butter.
One time I was like, I'm gonna fast. I had a bulletproof coffee. And it was like 4 p.m. and I was like, I'm still not hungry.
Oh yeah,
I thought I was fasting today. And I'm like, wait a second, I take a shitload of fat.
Yeah, you got a lot of calories in there. But yeah, it does quell your hunger for sure when you're drinking that butter coffee. But I wouldn't call it fasting.
No,
I feel bad because I put a millimeter of milk in my coffee. I mean,
you'll be fine.
If you had 2 tablespoons of butter in here, that's a meal.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right, cool. So let's wrap it up. Thanks, guys, for being on the show. And you have a seminar you run as well?
Yeah, I run.
Definitely plug it because I think. Yeah. I think more coaches should do it. I'm gonna try to get my coaches out to it this fall. Got away with me.
For coaches, it's I have 2 seminars, 2 kind of seminar streams, and the one takes it teaches a system of assessment, treatment, and rehab, and that's the functional range release. That's more geared towards manual therapists, and then going from rehab into mobility training and articular health promotion. That's a system that we call functional range conditioning, or FRC. And those seminars, certifications open to any manual therapist or health provider, like a personal trainer, strength and conditioning specialist. And what we do is we pretty much we teach a system of improving functional mobility, while at the same time increasing articular resilience, so increasing the quality of your tissues, and in so doing increasing the longevity of your joints and promoting joint health through this system of training. Yeah.
So that type of training, how would like a gym owner, for example, implement like a CrossFit box? How would that be implemented in a CrossFit box?
It would completely change what you do before a workout. It would likely change what you do after a workout, and even better, it'll give the coach, it'll teach them what to be looking for. Better coaching eye for the type of individual work that needs to be done. It's the way that we break it down, you can very easily watch someone do something and say, by the way, going back to movement, when I see a movement go wrong, I never say I know what the problem is. That's where I think people go wrong. But I can see, okay, there's something wrong. Lie down and check a few things, and right away you'll know the status of the shoulder, the status of the segmenting of the spine, exactly if they have the prerequisite for an exercise. That's the type of stuff we try to teach in the system so that you can see it. And then once you see it, you can go ahead and either address it through with the whole class or give individual work so that you can...
So how long is the certification?
It's 2 days.
Yeah.
But we also have a members-only site because there's a lot of information.
Yeah.
So on the the certified practitioners, they always have access to the online, online. They have all the exercises, all the lectures, so they can do the seminar over and over and over.
That's amazing.
And then we also have Facebook groups where people post questions and we have discussions and stuff like that. It's not like one of those ones you do it, you get a certificate.
Yeah,
you're for the people again.
That's a lot of crazy amount of information for
and you know what? There's lecturing. There's a lot of deep cellular biology science, but we do it in a way that it's palatable, so people understand. And I try to really give people, this is what you're actually doing. I know you think, oh yeah, I'm foam rolling, I'm mobilizing, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and you throw these words around. This is what you're actually doing, and this is what the literature would say you should do to progress to the next step, just like what you were talking about. So that's what functional range conditioning is.
Nice. And if they want to sign up for that, where do they go?
Yeah, functionalanatomyseminars.com is where I have all of my seminars, but you can go directly to functionalrangeconditioning.com as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
And they run pretty often, or?
They're running all throughout Europe, Canada, the United States. We have dates going. We're all the way up in 2016 right now.
Wow.
So there's a lot of dates.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Beauty.
Did you go to one yet?
No. I've read a lot about it. I implement this stuff like 90-90. Get people to do that just for their hips, to teach them how poorly moving their hips are, but just stuff that I've gleaned from Instagram and everything that I've read on the FAP website.
Yeah, I put out quite a bit of stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Anything you want to plug in?
Plug in?
Yeah. No?
No, it's your podcast.
No.
I'm just happy to be here.
You're not performing anywhere?
You're not performing?
No.
Seeing his handstand walks. All right. Peace out.
Thank you.